Yeah, I mean, I feel like Jordan Peterson in some ways typifies that, like, he very much feels like a combination of like a Tony Robbins character, like a very traditional self-help, but something I think that goes beyond that and which speaks to a very unique time in which we're living, where a lot of the previous self-help and personal finance gurus, because, you may not be as familiar with the personal finance world and the sort of guru world therein, but they had their own and have their own sort of cresting waves of self-help people and, sort of quasi almost like televangelist types
Sure.
that are all, similarly radical self-reliance. But up until very recently, the tone, I feel, of these sort of self-help bootstrap narratives were always sort of underpinned with a level of optimism and kind of joie de vivre that was made logical by the relatively prosperous economic times of like the 80s and 90s and even the beginning of the aughts. Whereas now with some of these characters that you see, again, I think Jordan being a perfect example of them, there's such there's almost like a desperate cynicism to it, in the sense that you are now acknowledging that the world is not good and things are getting bad in a very, very acute and tangible way, and the only option is to fix it. It comes from a place of cynicism that I do feel on some level is sort of almost attempting to acknowledge the deteriorating material conditions of the world we live in, but then always has to come back to that immediate, and it will all get better if you can just clean your room.
Right. That's interesting. I would love to watch more financial advice from the 80s, 90s, and early aughts. That sounds amazing. That's interesting. Do you find that that's true across the board? Like Jordan Peterson, I think he is deeply cynical as a figure. I think that's a huge part of why people like him so much, right? Because he represents an understanding of your angst that is simply not present in a lot of this self-help narrative. The same is true of something like School of Life, although that's just another topic I talk about on my channel sometimes. But you'll find with other sorts of self-help figures who don't have this sort of, I'm an important academic professor vibe about them, that at this point, so much of your capacity to get rich quick or get rich at all is conditioned on like gaming the system, right? The idea is that, we're all a bunch of sheeple and you can game the system by being outside of the matrix, and then from that vantage point you can get in there. And I think that Jordan Peterson quite rightly says, don't even, no, you're not, don't even think about gaming any kind of system. It's not about the system. Not that that's where he's wrong, of course. But I think that what people find so appealing about Jordan Peterson is his fundamental willingness to admit that life is painful and filled with suffering. And what's more, he's absolutely correct in one of his major claims, which is that you, as a human being, probably can't do too much to help it. How much are you actually going to get happier by being mad about billionaires owning all the money? What's the material impact of that anger? It's true that you could probably do a better job just making yourself feel better by ignoring it. I don't know if that's right or wrong. I've never studied it, neither has he, but there's no reason to presuppose that would make you feel better at all. So he's right in that regard.